yeah, I'm the best player and everyone gets to be around me. If you don't achieve a task in your training, then you have to clean the changing room. You aren't building a training program here where you're just judging everyone all the time. We don't want to burn ourselves out and think that every time we go to training, I've got to be stressed, I've got to be under pressure all the time. Hey team, what's happening? I'm Lewis Hatchett, mindset and mental performance coach, former professional athlete myself, also a master's student of performance psychology at Bangor University, also the host of the Raising Your Game podcast, and the creator of the Mind Strong Sport app. That is a lot to say. Today, we are talking about how you can set up your training so that you can start to perform better under pressure in competition. So if you find yourself sweating a lot under those clutch moments or not performing under those clutch moments, or maybe you want to become the go-to player when the pressure is on and everyone can just sing your praises and be like, yeah, I'm the best player and everyone gets to be around me, and you want to be that person, then this is how we're going to get your training set up so that you can start to perform in those moments. I think this happens to be one of the most common themes in the fact that those who don't perform well under pressure, they tend to not have any form of practice that puts themselves in a pressure situation. But before we get going, if you find value from this video, be sure to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and also hit the bell so that you become one of the first people to get notified when a new video comes out. All right, let's get going. Okay, so let's start off by just saying what actually causes pressure. So how the hell do we feel all this pressure? Now, usually you're going to feel it in tight games. So close moments in a match. It could be a really important match. It could be a final. It could be a race, maybe a debut, your first appearance in a certain team or a certain event. So moments where the pressure is ramped up. It's going to be a factor or a combination of factors that come together where the importance of you performing well in a certain situation increase. There is one other thing that I think is important to note when we feel pressure, and that is down to us having a lack of skills. Many athletes that I know who are performing at a really high level when it comes to under pressure situations, they have some of the best skill sets and they have the best knowledge around their skill sets. So the first thing in your training that you want to make sure is that you do have the skills. To think that you can perform under pressure with a very low level of skill is really just going to put it down to luck. It's not going to put it down to the fact that you know what you're doing. So when it comes to training, and these athletes that are super elite when it comes to pressure situations, they practice their skills a lot. They understand how they execute those skills and they measure how they're executing those skills. So they're really good at understanding their skill set, what it is they're trying to execute, especially when it comes to these moments that could require them under pressure. And before we start going into what we actually add into the training, it is important to know that no matter what we add into the training and the training itself, we will never get close to what it's like in competition and the pressure we feel in those moments. Saying that, it is not about not doing that because we're not going to feel it in training. It's about trying to get as close as you possibly can. But I do want to stress, when you're in a game, it is an entirely different beast. There are things there that you just genuinely can't replicate. So this training is designed to get you as close to that as you possibly can without actually experiencing it, and nothing does beat experience. So just remember that. Okay, so what are we actually going to add into our training? Now, we want to add something really around the fear of peer pressure, maybe something such as a reward, an incentive for us to go to, maybe a consequence. We might do something with the environment, and maybe even just an element of judgment. And I know we don't like judgment, but we ultimately as athletes are going to be judged, so we can't run away from it. So let's lean into it in our training and control it. So if you're setting up your training session, you can start to use one of these 6 ways in which we can add pressure into our training. So the first one I've got is forfeits. Now, forfeits would be something like, if you don't achieve a task in your training, then you have to clean the changing room. Okay, there was an actually really cool study done on cricket where they added pressure into a training system, and they did it over a few weeks. And some of the consequences they had, one of them was cleaning the changing room. The athletes felt pressure because they didn't want to have to clean the changing room. It was a bit of a bugbear. So when they were performing the task, that ramped up their pressure. So you can add in a range of different forfeits that you might need. It could be taking your mates out for dinner, taking your friends out for dinner, whatever it might be, just bringing bringing out the wallet and you having to do that forfeit. I did something in a pressure situation where a forfeit we had to do was we had to go into the English Sea in November up to our neck if we didn't achieve the task. And believe me, no one wanted to do that. So that ramped up the pressure and that got the heart rate going. The next one you can do is a reward. It's a very simple one. It could be monetary. It could be, again, you might take someone out for dinner or you might win a dinner. It could be as simple as a chocolate bar. Whatever it is, you create a reward, an incentive for someone to win, to succeed. But that pressure is built by not getting the reward if you don't achieve the task. So you want to create a reward that is incentivized enough for that person to want to take it, but also it's not a rubbish enough reward that they're not bothered and they don't feel any pressure at all. You want to balance that one. Next up is judgment. Now, this one is probably a high anxiety one for a lot of people because we ultimately feel that judgment of others, whether it's our teammates, whether it's our coaches, whether it's our friends, sometimes even if it's ourselves. But ramping up that judgment you can do in training. So you might have your coaches genuinely watching what you're doing. You might ask them to rank you against other teammates. While that may not be great because it's not great for your self-esteem and maybe can create some infighting, I would balance that one. You can do other things like get live reactions of people judging what you're doing. Now, I want to make sure that you aren't building a training program here where you're just judging everyone all the time. This is about judging them just to place the idea of judgment on them, exactly what you would have in competition, but you're not using a stick against your teammates or yourself and knowing that this whole session is built around just judging you. It's about how you respond to the pressure, the judgment that is being placed on you. So it's not about ruining yourself by just thinking you're constantly being judged. It's how you respond to it. That is important. Next up are task stressors. Now, this is about creating a task that becomes a little bit more difficult. So you might reduce the time at which you're going to do a task. You might create restrictions within that task. You might take away certain areas. You might reduce the error rate or the target that you're trying to go at. It's about creating some form of task that is much more difficult than you've had before. You don't want to create a task that is near impossible because you could disengage from it, but you want to make it difficult enough so that you feel the pressure, and that is going to help you build much more anxiety into your training. And as I know it's anxiety, but it is actually anxiety that we want. We want to stress ourselves in this situation. Another one is performer stressors. So performer stressors, leading in from task stressors, you can then put performer stressors. So this would be fatigue. I've done training sessions where we would run ourselves into the ground and then we would have to try and perform our skill. Because when your body is ramped up, when you're maybe fatigued, that's a stress on your system. And we are looking to increase the level of stress in what we're doing here because pressure is stress and we want to make sure that we feel enough of it. So some of that can be physical. If you're fatigued, it's much harder to do your task. You're going to feel the pressure. You have to focus, you have to concentrate. And that's where performer stressors such as fatigue can build that pressure. And then lastly, an environmental stressor. This might be something like noise. It could be, again, difficult conditions. You play on an environment, a facility that is not at the highest quality. That creates pressure because you've got to start thinking about what you're doing. And how you manage that environment can be stressful. That's enough pressure. It's going to ramp it up. There you go. You've got some pressure because you've created an environment that's not as easy as what you potentially would have in competition. All right, so if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the bell so that you become one of the first people to be notified when a new video comes out. All right, let's get back into this one. So now we've got our stressors, we've got the ways in which we can build our pressure. How often do we do this? Well, you don't want to do it every session because if you're just doing it every session, that is a very stressful training program. We don't want to burn ourselves out and think that every time we go to training, I've got to be stressed, I've got to be under pressure all the time because we're not going to be able to develop. It's actually there to stretch you, not snap you, but stretch you to really see what you can do. But if you continuously do that, there's a chance that you could fatigue yourself, you could get burnt out, you might even get injured, depending on what you're doing in the session. So you don't want to do it every session. The way I like to think of this is kind of like how marathon runners run and train. They don't train at their highest intensity every session, but they spend a lot of time running at zone 2, which is 70% of their heart rate. It's a very light jog. And you hear of marathon runners doing what's called the Kenyan shuffle. It looks a very, very slow run. But then they do one session every week, which is a threshold session. And it's where they push themselves outside of that normal running routine. And it's where they really stretch their ability. They really start to push the boundaries. And then the rest of it is about recovery. It's about just turning their legs over and doing it. I like to think of pressure training like this, that you throw it in once a week, maybe once every 10 days, and then your other sessions are there built to develop the skills that you've learned you need to work on through what you've learned in your pressure training situations. So when you come out of your pressure training, you've learned, okay, I need to be better at this certain skill, or I'm not as confident in that skill as I thought I was. So I'm going to spend the next 4-5 days working on that skill in my next training session. And I really focus on that. And then when you get to the next pressure training, you test it again. You try to fire it up and you see where you get. You might find at the end of it, you actually need to practice more mental skills. It may not be your skill that you're actually trying to execute that's the issue, but it may be the fact that you get distracted, you don't focus enough, you might feel too much anxiety and you don't know how to control it. So you may have to develop your mental skills. And if you want to do that, the best place to go is over to the MindStrong Sport app. It is the app to go to as an athlete to develop your mindset and mental skills, with exercises, mindset courses, meditations, all designed to help you strengthen your mind and make it your greatest skill as an athlete. Head over to the App Store, the iOS Store, the Google Play Store, every store that you can get your apps on to download it, and head to the link in the description to go there right now. Okay, so a little bit of a recap before we finish off. Stress and anxiety is a good thing. You want to add it into your training so that you can understand it. You don't want to add so much in that you start to disengage from the training so that it's too difficult and it's just completely overwhelming. And you don't want to do it so often that you are doing it every training session and you just become burnt out at it. But pressure training is so important because if you don't do it, then you will not know how you will perform under pressure in real life. Using this training, you can understand what skills you're potentially going to need, what mindset you're going to need, what mental skills you're going to need along the way, and go and find what it is that you need to improve and add that into your training when you're not doing pressure training. If you can do that, then undoubtedly you're going to increase your chances of performing and being that go-to player when clutch moments arrive and you are needed to perform under pressure. But if you can't wait any longer and you want to get started in developing your mental skills so that you can perform better under pressure, then you're going to want to head to this video right now.